And no better person to facilitate this than the lovely Mel Cullen, founder of Armour. She's amazing at what she does in the industry. And we've got some fantastic panellists. We've got Christy Edwards, Director of Revenue Optimisations for BWH Hotel Group. Jürgen, from Managing Director APAC from Ideas Revenue Solutions. Andrew Collins, Business Development, OTA Insights. And Nikita, Group Director of Revenue Australia, New Zealand for Nasuto. Please, these are the people who manage your rates. Big round of applause.
Great, thanks very much, Adrian, and good afternoon, everybody. Just get my bits and pieces here together. Right, well, welcome to the panel, and I think we've heard, we all know the external forces that, are playing havoc with our, with people that work in revenue optimisation and, demand projections and things. So a lot of those themes have already been talked about today. So I guess where I really want to try and take this discussion with this panel and our expert knowledge that we have here is to really focus on those shifting needs and wants of the customers and the consumer behaviour and how we really try and can reduce our revenue risk as people that work in revenue optimisation. Also, I think, how do we stop trying to put what are now maybe square pegs in round holes? We may have made some changes, but there's that temptation perhaps to keep trying to pull things back into those boxes that we're used to perhaps, and is the customer ready to meet us at the same place as where perhaps we want them to be? So there's that sort of piece which we'll look at. And then finally, also through our discussion is, it concerns me that if we're slow to evolve, that we don't want to potentially lose more market share to the third-party sites that may already be forging forward faster with things like it's basically a battle for flexibility, trust and risk reduction is the key for both the operator and also the consumer, which raises perceived value. So they're kind of the things that I'd like to try and delve deeper into with this discussion. So we'll open it up with, obviously, other than forecasting, which we'll look at in a moment, what's one observation in relation to revenue management strategy that has undergone significant change? And perhaps we'll start with yourself, Jürgen, given that you work in that space a lot.
I think if the one thing, and not talking about staffing levels because we've talked about that quite a bit already, but that is a challenge, and it will remain a challenge. But the one thing that we're seeing is that a lot more owners are becoming directly involved with revenue management strategies. Mm-hmm. So whereas in the past the hotels have been able to run their revenue management strategies either within the team or within the brand, lots and lots of times now the owner is directly involved.
Interesting. Okay, how about yourselves? Anybody else found a lot more involvement from other key stakeholders that perhaps weren't necessarily so interested before, or not interested? They're always interested in the profit you could make for them, but you know what I mean, getting more involved in the nitty-gritty.
I would say it's actually revenue people actually more and more involved than everything else. Mm-hmm. It's not about analyzing demand and predicting the demand, it's about generating the business. And for that, you need to be involved with digital media, with your marketing teams, with your operational teams. You need to talk to everybody. You need to speak to your sales team to actually, these good old times where you can turn around and tell your sales team, go and find me 1,000 room nights account. These things are gone, Now you need to say, can you please find me a small project in this area which will bring you 20 rooms? It's nothing, but they all had to do that to survive.
Yes. So do you think it's actually, because we've been talking about that cross-communication a lot for a number of years, do you think that this situation has really forced more for that to happen? The marketing, RM, all the teams working and communicating a lot more together?
We moved to the more of a commercial kind of structure. Instead of just revenue, mm-hmm. we have a commercial team which need to come together to actually not just deliver the revenue, but also deliver it in the most effective way.
Okay.
Because it's not hard to find some dollars, but if by delivering with those, you're still losing money. Why bother?
Okay. And you were nodding down there. Jürgen, are you seeing that with your clients, especially overseas as well?
Yeah, we're seeing that pretty much everywhere because everyone has had to reduce their team sizes as well. So there's a lot more, how to say, I wouldn't say clustering of tasks, but one person might have to do wear two or three different hats now, rather than the one hat they had in the past. So there's no only doing one thing. You have to actually think in three different ways. You have to think marketing and sales, and probably the most interesting one I came across was the revenue manager who was head of the maintenance department. And I thought, that's interesting.
Great. Yep.
But that's what's happening. That's what's happening in real life at the moment.
That's great. And then that in itself forces a greater awareness and understanding and education, pushes people out of their comfort zone to understand the core drivers of all of the areas. So that's interesting. So we will touch on forecasting, which we know is difficult. So I guess for the audience here today, I just wanted to try and get some practical strategies that perhaps you guys are using across your teams and what you're seeing across your clients in terms of, I guess we don't need to go too far back, but more sort of present now and going forward, what you've sort of been, doing on a day-to-day basis and how you've been managing that uncertainty. Christy or whoever wants to jump in.
So forecasting obviously always goes back to the data. It always has, always will. But obviously with the pandemic, a lot of the data sort of went out the window or it became quite redundant. So we've had to look at what data was available to us in new ways. So in terms of forecasting, previously you used to look at, year-on-year performance, what my patterns were last year, the few previous years, and how that related to peak event performance, day of week performance. Now we're having more to look at it on how did we perform last week, what was the booking pace last week, what was our market mix, what room types picked up faster than others, and what the advanced book window was for those, so that you can make then adjustments for the next few weeks ahead. And obviously longer term as well, but it's really tracking that shorter term historical base to make decisions for longer term.
Okay, great.
And probably having 5 different options of forecast.
Yes.
Pivot. Yeah.
That's it.
I would say one of the probably favorite things and ideas revenue management solution right now is the what if function. You type it in and it spits out the potential projections. We have to do the same.
Yep.
We have to look at what if another outbreak happens, or what if we get another rainbow. How does that affect? And we have to learn from it, how each region performs, how each hotel performs, how each segment performs. Some additional rainfall might help construction industry, but leisure will disappear. So we're having sometimes, forecast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a worst case scenario. And then we'll look at the, for example, worst case scenario and making sure that doesn't happen.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Good. And Christy, with the regional areas that have obviously, we know, have performed quite well in many instances, obviously impacts with floods and different things, unfortunately, as well. But are you sort of concerned of a looming softening, and what sort of customer retention strategies are you exploring, perhaps?
Yeah, so predominantly the regional areas are going exceptionally well right now. We're far exceeding 2019 revenue levels. Most of that is rate driven rather than through occupancy, which is obviously really good for our owners. That's reducing costs for them. But we're obviously looking at that as that may go away. So we need to capitalise on it while we can, but in terms of retaining that and planning for the future, that's where it really comes down to your core customer service values, making sure your value proposition, what you're offering the guests, they are seeing it as value for the higher rates that you're charging. Obviously loyalty programs come into play with that as well. So BWH Group has loyalty programs, as do many other brands, but trying to keep your branding top of mind with these new leisure customers that you're seeing at the moment. So they're ones that potentially have never travelled to the regions before because they haven't been able to travel internationally. So it's about trying to give them a good, authentic local experience so that they'll be tempted to come back or talk to their friends and family and entice them to come back.
Okay.
And then also overarching over that, obviously the safety standards, your cleaning protocols. Obviously cleaning's always been a very important factor for hotels.
Anyway, that's
but
right, I know.
making sure that the guest is reassured that you're, you know, meeting those higher standards for COVID safety.
Absolutely. Okay, very good. And Andy, I'll just bring you in here now. Thank you. You've been sitting there patiently, but I'm coming to you and all your data insights that you can share with us. So yeah, we were chatting before about some interesting observations you've seen with flight search data and different things. So from a consumer behaviour perspective and sort of patterns and interesting insights that you might like to share with us, would be interesting to hear those.
Yeah, I guess it feeds into what a bit of the conversations that have been had earlier today is in what people are after from a hotel perspective is accuracy of the data. So we're seeing there that going back into the forecasting and what's changed is a case of how accurate is the information, can I see what's happening in the market right now? And then what we're seeing is, if we look at Sydney, for instance, the flight search information, when we looked at that at the start of the year, we could see that that was 95% domestic. So looking at it this morning before I come in here, the flight search for inbound into Sydney is now 30% domestic. So there is interest from an international perspective, and so the intention to travel is there, so we can see that people are starting to come. And then the key source markets are the traditional source markets, so there is interest and we're starting to see that come in, so then it will feed into how these guys will look at how they're going to forecast, how they're going to work with their commercial teams in that market space. So we are seeing the evolution of the demand, and it's just a case of how it's going to carry on for us over the coming weeks and months.
And how do you see, what's the response of certain segments? Say, we were chatting before about the corporate segment. When there's changes in the regulations and things that are all out of our control, but when you see a change somewhere, what sort of uptake are you seeing? Or
yeah, so I think probably one of the most interesting things, if we looked at, and probably a lot of people here have travelled, is when the immediate removal of the mask mandate in offices, we saw the GDS channel and the corporate search immediately start to escalate. So seeing
people
corporate
want to
travel,
chat without a mask and just,
there is definitely screen fatigue in regards to a business meeting, and people will still look at ROI, but there's definitely seeing some corporate travel coming back in that space the minute the mask mandate disappeared in Sydney and Melbourne offices.
Interesting. I was just reading some research from the airlines, and they were saying how the demand for the premium top deck was really growing because people would pay for the space, whether their company was prepared to pay for it or not. So, you know, looking at how they can really upgrade those premium, even selling out before business class, they would normally fill. And you think about an airline where it's economy, like stuck in, like, you know, so close to people, and it's shifting people to opt for the more premium products. So that was interesting. Okay, so I wanted to look at quick wins now. So you've probably gone through a phase where you've been just, you know, like you've had to have many balls in the air and lots of different things we've been sort of reacting and pivoting to, and perhaps now you're coming to a period where hopefully, you know, there's some more stability. But did you have any interesting quick wins that you've implemented or that you've heard of being implemented across your clients that was a bit different, things that people have tried, lessons learned, maybe some things you put in place that now you'll actually keep but you might not have thought of without the pandemic happening? So is there anything there that you could share? Bringing back the 6 p.m. hold, possibly, in some cases.
I think it's not really a quick win, but actually the biggest win which we had throughout the pandemic is we grew our partnerships. We actually did realize that there are certain companies and agents and our business partners who actually support us throughout the pandemic. And our relationship grew quite a lot, and that's actually what helped us to survive.
Right.
So, they consolidated their travel, they increased their offering, they made sure that they look after them, the value adds, everything else. And they supported us, we supported them, and because of that, we managed to maintain a certain level of occupancy and certain level of profitability throughout COVID.
Excellent.
And I would say that was probably not a really quick one, but it's definitely a win for us.
Yes. Yeah, it's brought that front of mind more in terms of the importance of relationships and how people, really try to stick with you or help you out, because everybody's been hit in some way. So I've seen, we went through an explosion of pet policies as well for a while, and I'm just going to throw that in just quickly on the panel, because I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but I just wondered at the time, could that be a quick win that potentially could cause longer term pain in some cases? Thoughts on that, anybody?
If I could take pets in my hotels, trust me, I would, because it's a special market in there. But there
is a market, but it's also not for everyone. So I wonder what the trade-off is.
I think there's actually a growing market in it, but I think you've got to be very careful about what sort of property you introduce it to. So some of our regional properties do have pet-specific rooms, but they are set up for that. So they'll have a courtyard, they'll have, tiled floors, they'll have, basically pet-friendly rooms that are easily cleaned and maintained after a pet's been there. And they've had those in place for quite some time, not just from COVID. And they are booked at a very high frequency. So there is some value there. But, a CBD hotel that's totally enclosed, no, I wouldn't be looking at doing it there.
Yeah.
So I think you've just got to be careful about where you implement things, and that really applies to all quick wins. You've really got to look at what it is and what property, what market you're applying it to.
And think across the impact across all segments that you might attract, and what that, the knock-on effect could be as well. So, okay, good. Did you have anything else you want to jump in there? All right, so I just wanted to now touch on consumer trust and need for control. Like, that's been challenged a lot for us all personally as well through this situation. So obviously, I think that is, it plays a bigger part potentially. Now it's at the front of people's mind more in terms of who they're going to do business with. How important is it to factor it in? Like, we know, people buy with their emotions. We know we battle all the psychological nudges and things that are on the OTA websites and things. So how much do you think that's really been looked at, perhaps in your properties or your clients, or if you have any thoughts around that? Because I think it's a big piece that I worry that we might be slow to getting to. Like, some are doing it well, but some aren't there yet. So how are we going to manage all of that?
People have always bought with their emotions, to be honest, but I think it's just different what people look at now. You mentioned the airline thing just now, the airline, people buying, even paying themselves for the difference.
Correct.
Even if the company wouldn't pay for it. So that's one of the things, but I think that's the whole emotional thing. You just need to be aware of what are people buying now, how are they valuing that, and then adjust your strategy to that. That's really what we see as well.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's taking into account all of your customer feedback, making sure you're monitoring all of that. What are people saying about you and your products and the booking path, and adjusting accordingly. So the OTAs, as you said, do a lot of their marketing and advertising very well. That's why we all partner with them. They're very good at displaying, book now, free cancellation, etc. Obviously, all they're doing is adopting the hotel's cancellation policies and whatever we've put on there. But we need to make sure that we're, marketing those policies to our direct guests as well, and that we're offering just as much or more flexibility to clients booking direct than are through OTAs or third-party channels. And flexibility for booker confidence is key. It has been for the last 2 years because, everything's still very unknown. You don't know whether you're going to suddenly get COVID or be a close contact and have to cancel your plans. So I think having a flexible rate strategy moving forward is still going to be very important. So changing up that traditional mix of only having discounted non-refundable rates and things like that, and making sure that the majority of your offerings are flexible will be significant for quite a long time moving forward.
Because once you've moved the customer to that point where you said the non-refundable rates, you noticed, disappeared quickly, was that right? And once you move the customer to that place, then, you know, it's hard to sort of rein it back potentially. So
Yeah, I think obviously in the height of the pandemic, there was very few properties still offering advanced purchase or non-refundable rates, which you guys probably attest to. But what, again, we're seeing in the last kind of 3 to 6 weeks is they are starting to come back. So we are seeing the non-refundable and the APs starting to be rolled out in certain markets, depending on property strategies. They're not as necessarily as long a lead as they were, so they're not, you know, kind of 28-day AP in the past. They're more looking at kind of 7-day, which is probably now some would say is a long lead, depending on the market. But I think probably one of the main elements we saw there is the semi-flexible rate that came in. So you're having your best flex of 24-hour or on-the-day cancellation, but now then there's that 3-day or that 5-day cancellation where people can still get a deal. They get that kind of the warm and fuzzies of the value proposition, but they know that they're not paying for it straight away, so they've got the confidence of having the money in their hand, but they have that slightly more restrictive policy that drops in a week before they arrive or 3 days before they arrive. So the value proposition is there, but also the flexibility to give them the confidence to book that rate is there. So that's probably the biggest change that we've seen in the last kind of year, is that coming into play.
And because we see, like, the messaging obviously is really important, and because then that goes to building trust in the consumer, and we obviously want to increase our conversion rates and all of that. But, you know, often you'll see the free cancellation hook, and then when you get in there, it's, oh, but it's up until, you know, so many days prior or whatever, which is still some degree of flexibility, but it's not necessarily matched with the initial hook. So I wonder, any feedback on that, or does that annoy customers, or is that an area we just don't want to, like, let go of?
It's an area you have to be careful, I think, as well, because if you're looking at domestic visitors to your hotel or guests to your hotel, I think that's fine. But if you're looking at international, there are still a lot of countries where you need to test before you get on a plane. So I only test 24 hours before I get on a plane, which means I'm going to have a very last-minute cancellation if I test positive. If anything, the pandemic has learned us, I think, is you have to be very, very flexible in everything you do, whether it's with your rules like this, your cancellation policies, whether it's with your price points, your discounting, etc. No point to discount to Chinese customers at the moment. They're not going to come. So don't ruin your pricing by trying to attract people from Asia at this point, I would say, in general, because they're not going to come in big numbers yet.
Yes, that's right. It's not, there's other forces. It's not the discount that's going to necessarily sway them. And we're going to look at if there's any other strategies around, because our industry is so 10%, which almost doesn't resonate often. I don't know, but, you know, like, it just seems like it's the go-to thing. So obviously we talk about creating value and all of that, but we've got to bear in mind these other forces that are driving or swaying their decisions. So, yeah, did you have any insights onto other ways to perhaps create value rather than jumping to the discount, like Jürgen said? Things that you're doing, whether it's just tweaking your messaging, the way you communicate the value to customers, or giving them more choice and options.
You need to promote your flexibility. You need to make sure that all your customers are confident that if something happens, you'll give them the money back. And it's all about risk and return, you know. It's I had to educate my team to say, because we were concerned that, look, what if they cancel on the day of arrival? It's like, okay, if you're fully booked, market should be compressed, you should be able to sell at last minute. If market is not compressed, you would have had an empty room anyway.
That's right.
So, you know, put yourself in the shoes of your client, you know, to see what do we want. Do we need free parking? Do you start promoting the complimentary upgrades? If you can't use the full occupancy of a hotel because of your staffing issues, which rooms do you use? Do you actually use the cheapest rooms, the ones which are easy to clean? Or do you actually turn around and say, you know what, I'm gonna put everybody on a nice level, rooms a bit bigger. Yes, it's gonna cost me a little bit more to clean, but my guest satisfaction will go through the roof, my reviews will go through the roof. You know, we're slowly looking at what we can do to actually build our TripAdvisor reviews, to build our Booking.coms and Expedia reviews, how to actually get people talking about us, about what we do, and what value we actually give them, instead of just purely giving 10% discount, 20% discount. Look, everybody can give 10%. But we all know to actually, you know, you put a rate up by 20% and then you give 30% discount. So why try? People are smart nowadays. We know how the sales
They
work.
are.
So, you know, build the package, even if you don't have something to package. Some of our hotels don't have F&B. So we need to look at an intangible thing, welcome presents, you know, welcome gifts, you know, early check-in, late checkouts. We have occupancy and availability to do that. Why not give it as a
Correct.
knob?
And you can break it up. It doesn't have to be the same, like across the whole, you know, whole year. Obviously protecting your peaks and flexing things. Good. All right, and we're nearly wrapping up, but I did want to also explore the impact of staff shortages and supply chain logistics, and how from a revenue optimization perspective that's possibly presented challenges to you, and how, if you're able to, can you navigate around that at all? Have you been able to navigate around it?
So I think regionally it's, well, I think everywhere it's been incredibly frustrating to finally be getting demand and be able to be charging really good rates and be able to recover some revenue from the last couple of years, and then suddenly you'll have, you know, receptionists that are close contacts, or housekeeping staff so that you can't service rooms, or in terms of supply chain, we've had hotels unable to get linen, so they weren't able to service rooms. And in that case, you know, they're having to take rooms offline that they could have sold at premium rates. And so it's just one of those very frustrating things when you're trying to recover that revenue for them, and they're losing out. So I guess in that case, it's about choosing which rooms to take offline. If it's a peak date, I'm making sure that, you know, my higher room types will be able to be serviced, so I can charge premium rates for those. And then, you know, sort of my lead-in room types, maybe they're the ones that we hold over and don't service, because I'll get less revenue for those. So it's making those adjustments, and just supporting our hotels in terms of looking ahead in staffing and how many, you know, staff they'll need, and trying to give them as accurate forecast ahead of time as you can, which is very difficult when the advanced booking window is so short at the moment. But trying to give them some insight so that they know what sort of staffing levels they need to operate at.
Okay. And Jürgen, what are you seeing in terms of, from the tech perspective and the innovations and the things in this space with the products that you do offer, which are wonderful for revenue optimization, but given uncertainty and all of that, what things have evolved perhaps in your space, or things that you're looking at moving forward?
Well, revenue management is one of the functions that leads itself very well to clustering, you know, like finance does, or maybe marketing does, but it's very well, you can do that very easily in revenue management. So one of the things that we focused on is to make sure that the tools that people can then have that run a cluster are the ones that they need to be able to do that.
Okay. Interesting. And was there any other data insights or customer behaviour observations you're seeing or hearing that would be worthwhile sharing? Put you on the spot now for some final insights before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I think, like, following on from Jürgen there, is from being able to look at the accuracy of the information that they have, so people can not spend time thinking about what is going to happen, but being able to dive into the OTA Insight platform and see, right, this is what's happening in our market, this is what's happening with our competition. I can quickly jump in, make a decision now, and move on to the other 15 jobs I've got to do today.
That's right.
So
the 15 hats everybody's wearing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we are seeing things are improving. Length of stay restrictions are coming back in high demand periods. If we look at Melbourne for this weekend for the Grand Prix, we can see now that everything is on a 5-night minimum, which is probably something that people would think was unheard of a couple of months ago. So yeah, there's when things are happening, the demand is there. So things are looking bright.
Okay.
So when it's there. So.
Good. Oh, that's encouraging. Excellent. So just to wrap up our panel, we'll go through, and I guess if you just have a think about if they were to leave, when they leave this room and go back to their jobs, what is one practical thing that you think they should go and take a look at in terms of increasing their conversions or their pricing, their flexibility, anything around that? Is there something, a nugget of gold that you would give them to walk out and make sure they go and take a look at with their teams? Who wants to start? I'll give you a moment to have a brainwave, think of something.
So if it's low demand, don't discount. You're not going to buy business. And take advantage of every opportunity that you can in terms of really looking at your room type patterns. We're really seeing some high yielding for larger room types, apartments, suites and things like that. They're really in demand with this current leisure segment that is really driving all the business at the moment. So be looking at those, and obviously your event periods and making sure that you're really capitalising on those. But then really make sure that the hotel teams are focusing on customer service and satisfaction, so that your review scores stay up there with those higher prices that you're charging, and that you will have guests returning to you.
Okay, great.
I would
Few
say
in there.
just really need to talk to everybody in a team. It's not just revenue management will solve the issue of profitability. It's everybody has to work like a commercial team to find these small pockets of opportunity, like the peak day, when you can see the demand is building up, so you can capitalize on that. As Christy said, it's no point of discounting when it's no demand. Nobody is going to come anyway. So
that's not the driver.
just find the opportunity which you can actually cash in on and just do it.
Okay.
Don't be scared, be flexible, agile, take a risk, and it will pay off.
Okay, great. Andrew, or we'll go to Jürgen. Got some gem there?
Well, just very, very quickly, I think base your decisions on analytics, look at those numbers and make sure you understand them, and then make the right decision based on the analytics.
Yes, data. Data tells the story.
Data.
Yes. And I'm going to keep looking at, you're going to have one, you've got one in there.
No, I was just going to talk more about data. No. I think, based on what was being said earlier around policies and flexibility and cancellations, is look at your reviewing that versus your comp set. So looking at policy parity, where's all your channels, your comp set, making sure you're in line with the market there, because moving away from discounting, if that does become an opportunity for you to compete, there's definitely going to be some scope there. So stay on top of your policies as things move forward.
Fantastic. All right, well that wraps up our panel. Adrian, I can't see if you're out where you are. Oh, there you are. I don't know if you want us to leave now or questions, but we're complete.
Over time, but
okay.
I'm sure these panels will be staying around after. So please thank a very important panel, the revenue management panel. Some great insights. Really, really good. Thank you.